My husband and I were excited to start our life together, especially since we had just found out we were expecting our first child. Little did we know our dream of a peaceful neighborhood was about to be shattered by the self-proclaimed royalty of the cul-de-sac. Our first encounter with a neighbor across the street seemed pleasant enough. She introduced herself with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and welcomed us to the neighborhood. However, things took a turn for the bizarre when my mother-in-law came to visit a few weeks later. My mother-in-law parked her car across the street, opposite our neighbor's driveway. It was a perfectly legal spot and we thought nothing of it. That is, until we heard a commotion outside. I stepped out, baby in arms, to find our neighbor red-faced and gesticulating wildly at my mother-in-law's car. Our neighbor was shouting that this was her property and that we couldn't park there. My mother-in-law calmly pointed out that it was a public street. The neighbor insisted that the entire section was part of her driveway. When I asked if there was a problem, the neighbor accused my guest of trespassing on her property. I looked at the street, then at our neighbor's actual driveway, which was clearly not obstructed in any way. Confusion doesn't begin to describe what I was feeling. I tried to explain that the car was parked on the street, not in her driveway. The neighbor's response was to yell that it was illegal and that she was calling the police. And just like that, she stormed off to her house, leaving us bewildered on the sidewalk. My mother-in-law and I exchanged looks, unsure whether to laugh or be concerned. My mother-in-law asked if she should move the car, but I assured her she wasn't doing anything wrong and suggested we wait to see what happens. We didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, other neighbors started poking their heads out, curious about the commotion. As it turns out, we weren't the first victims of the driveway dictator. One neighbor approached us shaking his head. He told us not to worry about her, explaining that she'd been doing this to everyone. He mentioned that just last week, she had left a note on his car threatening to have it towed. Another neighbor chimed in, sharing a story about how our problematic neighbor had told a social worker visiting an elderly resident that she was parking illegally. The poor social worker had been so flustered that she almost left without checking on her patient. As we traded stories, a police car pulled up. Our driveway overlord rushed out clutching a mug and looking triumphant. The officer went into her house, and we waited with bated breath. When he finally emerged, he looked more confused than when he arrived. He made his way to us, notepad in hand. The officer inquired about a complaint they'd received regarding a car blocking a driveway. My mother-in-law identified her car as the one in question, pointing to the silver vehicle across the street. The officer looked at the car, then back at us, his brow furrowed. He expressed confusion about the issue, noting that the car wasn't blocking any driveway. I explained that our neighbors seemed to think the entire street was her personal property. I showed him a photo I'd taken earlier of where the car was parked, complete with a timestamp. The officer sighed deeply and asked if there had been any other issues with this neighbor. And that's when the floodgates opened. Our neighbors filled him in on the notes, the threats, and the general harassment they'd been experiencing. The officer diligently took notes, his expression growing more exasperated by the minute. Our neighbor had told the officer that I had trained my cat to use her garden as a litter box. I assured the officer that I had not trained my cat to do anything, joking that he barely listens when I call him for dinner. The officer tried to maintain his professional demeanor, but I could see the corners of his mouth twitching. He thanked us for our time and returned to our neighbor's house. We couldn't hear what was said, but judging by her expression, when he left, it wasn't what she wanted to hear. Later, we learned that the officer had warned her about harassment and making false reports. He also mentioned that if anyone caught them driving under the influence, another neighborly observation, they'd be arrested. Our entitled neighbor now parks across from her own driveway in some sort of protest. The rest of us, we make sure to legally park in front of and behind her car whenever possible. In 2020, I lost everything in a wildfire. All I had left was what I could stuff into my Ford Focus during the evacuation. My landlord, on the other hand, had a big GMC truck and a fifth-wheel trailer. He and his family got out with everything they needed. That's when I realized I needed to be better prepared. For a while, I was couch surfing, but eventually ended up in a tent village with other fire victims. I furnished my tent like a tiny apartment and kept working, saving every penny I could. My goal? To buy a truck of my own. Fast forward to a few months ago. I finally had enough saved up to buy a used Chevy Silverado 1500. It wasn't perfect. A few dents, a big scratch across the hood, and some weather-worn paint, but it had low mileage and recent repairs. I was over the moon. I bought it from a guy in his 50s who said he couldn't use it anymore due to a bad back. He even knocked $1,000 off the price when he saw how much I loved it. I was thrilled with my new ride. A few weeks later, I was in the same area looking at a used camp trailer. After deciding against it, I stopped at a local diner for dinner. As I was leaving, I noticed a woman in her 40s examining my truck. I approached her and asked what she was doing. She immediately demanded to know where I got the truck. When I told her I had bought it a few weeks ago. She accused me of stealing it. I denied her accusation, explaining that I had purchased it from the rightful owner. The woman then pulled out her phone and showed me a picture of the truck with the same guy who sold it to me. She triumphantly declared that this proved I had stolen it and demanded I return it to her immediately. I calmly explained that I had bought the truck fair and square from the man in the photo and that it was now mine. Frustrated, she sat on my bumper and called the police, exaggerating wildly. I decided to wait it out. When the police arrived, she went into full drama mode, claiming that her truck had gone missing and she had finally found it. She demanded they arrest me for grand theft auto. I remained calm and showed the officers my documents, asking them to verify that I was the legal owner. The woman tried to get into my truck, but I quickly locked it. She kept insisting that they should just arrest me. After checking my information, the officer confirmed everything was in order and told me I was free to go, stating that the truck checked out as mine. The woman couldn't believe it and demanded they check again. She then showed more pictures on her phone, including one with the man who sold me the truck. I pointed out that this was the person I had bought it from and that I didn't know who the woman was. She then revealed that he was her soon-to-be ex-husband and they were getting divorced. She claimed he had bought the truck for her. I explained that when I bought it, only his name was on the title. The woman angrily said he had sold it without her permission. The officer had to break the news to her that the truck was now legally mine. The woman broke down crying. Feeling a bit bad for her, I suggested to the officers that they might want to do a wellness check on her. As I was preparing to leave, she shouted that she was going to follow me and find out where I lived. The officers quickly intervened, putting her in their car before she could act on that threat. I wasted no time in getting out of there. Later, I contacted the seller. He confirmed she was his soon-to-be ex-wife, who had cheated on him twice. The truck was always in his name and she had signed a prenup. The divorce wasn't going her way. It's been months now, and I haven't seen her again. I avoid that area just in case, but for all I know, she might not even live there anymore. I'm just glad I finally have my truck, and I'm better prepared for whatever life throws at me next. I've always been a city girl at heart, but after years of hustling in the concrete jungle, I decided it was time for a change. The stress of my high-powered job in finance was taking its toll, and I longed for a quieter life. So I took the plunge and bought a charming house in a small suburban neighborhood. It wasn't easy leaving everything behind, but I was ready for a fresh start. The house was perfect, a cozy two-story with a spacious yard that I couldn't wait to turn into my personal oasis. I had big plans for a garden and maybe even a small vegetable patch. The neighbors seemed friendly enough when I first moved in, though I didn't have much time to socialize before I had to leave for a week-long business trip to tie up loose ends at my old job. When I returned from my trip early one Sunday morning, I was exhausted and looking forward to a quiet day of unpacking and settling in. But my yard was filled with people, music was blasting, and the smell of barbecue filled the air. For a moment, I thought I must have the wrong house. I got out of my car, still can't believe it, when a woman I vaguely recognized as my next-door neighbor approached me with a big smile. She greeted me cheerfully, mentioning my return and asking if I could get more ice from the store as they were running low. Confused, I asked her what was going on. She casually explained that it was the neighborhood summer bash and that my yard was perfect for it. I pointed out that this was my property and I hadn't authorized this. She dismissed my concerns, saying I had barely lived here and that my house was much bigger than hers, so it made sense to use this space. I tried to explain that she couldn't just use someone else's property without permission. She brushed off my objection, saying it was too late now as the party was in full swing. She then suggested I join in and help serve the food. When I protested that this was my house, she agreed, saying this was how neighbors help each other. She then handed me a trash bag and urged me to start cleaning up some empty plates. I stood there, mouth agape, trying to process the audacity of this woman. But before I could respond, she was already shoving a trash bag into my hands and pushing me towards a group of people. For the next hour, I found myself in a surreal situation, mechanically picking up trash in my own yard while trying to figure out how to end this nightmare. Every time I tried to speak up, Karen would appear, shooing me towards another task, or introducing me to someone as the new neighbor who's so generously hosting us. Finally, I'd had enough. I marched up to Karen, who was chatting with a couple by the grill. I told her that the party needed to end now. She laughed it off, saying we were just getting started. I insisted, telling her this was my property and I wanted everyone gone. Karen turned to the couple, expressing shock at my selfishness. She then told me that I clearly didn't understand how things worked around here, and that this house was wasted on someone like me. When I asked for clarification, she pointed out a friend of hers who was looking for a place just like this. She suggested making a deal, assuring me her friend would give a fair price. Shocked, I asked if she was trying to sell my house. She replied that I clearly didn't appreciate it and her friend would make much better use of it. That was the last straw. I stormed into my house, grabbed my phone, and called the police. When I came back out, Karen was still chatting with her friend as if nothing had happened. I announced that I had called the police and the party was over. Karen reacted with indignation, claiming this was a neighborhood event. I reminded her that it was on my private property, which she was trespassing on. The police arrived within minutes, and the party quickly dispersed. As officers took statements, I watched Karen's face turn from indignant to panicked. An officer questioned Karen about organizing the event without the homeowner's permission. Karen stammered, trying to explain herself. The officer then asked if she had attempted to sell property that didn't belong to her. Karen tried to brush it off as a joke, claiming I didn't understand their community spirit. In the end, Karen was charged with trespassing and attempted fraud. The other neighbors, horrified by her actions, came by over the next few days to apologize and help clean up. Karen put her house up for sale a month later. I heard that she was moving to a condo in the city. Apparently, suburban life was too stressful for her. When we finally got that big break, a promotion for him and a successful side business for me, we decided it was time to upgrade. Our new house was everything we dreamed of. Spacious, modern, with a beautiful yard for our 6-month-old daughter to play in. But little did we know our slice of paradise came with a catch. Our next-door neighbor. From day one, this woman was a thorn in our side. She'd complain about everything, the color of our curtains, how often we mowed our lawn, even the brand of car we drove. It was like nothing we did was good enough for Her Highness. At first, we tried to be friendly. My husband and I would wave and smile, hoping to break the ice. But she'd just turn up her nose and strut away like we were beneath her. Things took a turn for the bizarre about a month after we moved in. I was in the front yard pushing my daughter on her little swing when the neighbor came marching over, pushing a stroller. The neighbor approached me with a snide comment about flaunting my child. When I explained I was just giving my daughter some fresh air, she grudgingly admitted that my baby was cuter than hers. I was shocked by her words about her own child. I tried to be polite, saying all babies are precious, but she insisted that mine was superior and that she deserved a baby like that. Before I could respond, she took off. A week later, there was a loud banging on our door. I opened it to find the neighbor, red-faced and wild-eyed, clutching a squirming toddler. She announced that she had come to trade babies. When I expressed my confusion, she clarified that she wanted to swap her baby for mine, claiming she was a better mother. I told her she was insane and that babies couldn't be traded. The neighbor then produced a piece of paper, insisting it was a legal document giving her the right to swap our children. She demanded I hand over my baby. I slammed the door in her face and called the police. The police came, but she played it off as a misunderstanding. They warned her to stay away, but that was just the beginning. She started showing up everywhere we went. If we took our daughter to the park, there she was, watching us from behind a tree. When we went grocery shopping, we'd spot her peeking around the aisles. It was terrifying. One night I woke up to a noise in the nursery. I crept down the hole and peeked in, only to see a figure leaning over my daughter's crib. I flipped on the light, and there she was, our neighbor, arms outstretched toward my baby. She was cooing to my daughter, telling her not to cry and that Mommy was there to take her home. I screamed, my husband came running, and we managed to chase her out. But that was the last straw. We got a restraining order, installed security cameras, and even hired a lawyer to help us fight back. It turns out we weren't her first victims. Our lawyer dug up a history of similar incidents in other neighborhoods. She'd been forcing families out of their homes for years, always fixating on their children. With the evidence mounting, the police finally took action. They arrested her, and during the search of her home, they found a room full of baby clothes, toys, and even a wall of photos, all of children that weren't hers. The trial was a media circus. Our neighbor tried to play the victim, claiming she just wanted to save the children from unfit parents. But the jury didn't buy it. She was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to years in prison. We decided to stay in our home. We weren't going to let one twisted individual drive us away from the life we'd worked so hard to build. Our neighborhood rallied around us, and we formed a tight-knit community. Now, when I look out at our beautiful yard and watch my daughter play, I feel a sense of peace. We faced a nightmare and came out stronger. And every so often, when a new family moves in, I make sure to be the first one to welcome them, with a plate of cookies and a genuine smile.